Yeah. No, sounds good.
All right. So I have today on Matt from Rentals Cash Flow. We met in a pretty cool way. I've met you actually. I was thinking about this at breakfast today. Met you 3 times before breakfast today, and we really don't know each other.
No, no, not at all. Yeah, and I'm still not 100% sure where the first place we met was, so I think you're
So
gonna need to
I remember
remind me
this. I
again. Yeah,
remember
yeah.
this. I'm a very forgettable
Okay,
person,
okay, yeah,
apparently.
yeah.
So we met in Vegas last
Okay.
day of the trade show. We both
Yes.
showed up to breakfast when it was too. They changed the time for breakfast, so
Okay.
we showed up too early.
Yep, yep.
So we would ate there, and then we met in Nashville. By the way, we were in Vegas for a short-term rental conference, not just chilling by ourselves in Vegas, but without our wives and everything. And then met again in Nashville at the short-term rental wealth conference,
Yep, yep.
and then in the airport after that. And,
Okay, yeah. I'm like, where's number 3? Like, I
Yep,
don't remember
yep.
seeing you again. Yeah, that was funny. Because I remember one in Nashville. Every time I saw it, it's like, it's AJ. And then
Yep.
at the airport, I'm like, why is this guy even here? It's like, is this guy following me home or something? And it's like,
Yep.
do you like why are you going to Des Moines? And you're like, well, I live in Des Moines. Like, where are you going to Des Moines? I live in Des Moines. What?
Yep. And this is you're officially the first person I know in Des Moines. So
Yeah,
this is
yeah.
a really, really big deal.
Yeah, at least that I've seen at like another conference. Des Moines, I mean, you'd think that it's like this big hotspot for real estate investors, but shockingly, it's not.
Yeah.
So
Everybody's thinking that. Well, yeah.
There's like 3 of us here. So
Yeah. Yep.
but yeah.
So yeah, want to get started. We were at breakfast this morning. Just there's a lot of cool stuff about your life that wanted to dive into.
I'm glad you think that.
Yeah. I'm the only one. The first and foremost, not to get into this too far, is you replace your full-time job in working the corporate world with passive / non-passive, because you got to work at it.
Yep,
income.
yep.
That's what the main point is today, and I'm really excited to dive into a lot of that.
Yeah.
But before we do that, do you want to give us a little bit of a backstory, like life, college, like what geared you up for this, and then going into Google, like your backstory before you ever started?
Yeah, definitely. So, when I was growing up, my lifelong dream was not to be a real estate investor. Yeah, as a 5-year-old, that's what I want to do. No, but I didn't really have like necessarily a huge like drive as to exactly what I wanted to do with my life, but I knew that I love people. I loved working with people. And I started as a paramedic. That's what I was gonna do. So went to school for that, and I quickly realized it was not for me. To the paramedics out there, super proud that there are great paramedics out there, but it was not for me. So I went from trying to save lives to instead try to save souls. Right. So I grew up in the church. With my family. My parents brought me there, but I realized as a young adult that I wanted to devote my life to Christ as well, and so I thought that a way that I could serve Him better as well would be to work with kids in the church. So I went to college to become a youth pastor, and I got a biblical studies degree so I could do that. After graduation, I was looking around for something to do with that degree, and I realized very quickly that there's not just youth pastor jobs all over the place. So I'm like, dang, I need to make some money somehow. So I ended up getting a job just to pay the bills with at a local Sprint store. And after about a year there, it turned into something that I ended up loving doing. I'd never worked retail prior to that. I had done manual labor construction jobs. What was a strawberry picker as a kid. So, but yeah, that was the first time I really got to like work with people, help people in the technology space, and I enjoyed it and I excelled at it. So after about a year with that, I moved up the ranks, and I was a district manager running 5 stores in the
Wow.
in the Des Moines market, and had a passion for it. So I enjoyed it. The pay wasn't great. I worked with like a dealer, not with corporate, so they don't pay you as well. But it was something. It was a start, and I enjoyed doing it. I got married in the mix there too, within that time frame. But yeah, it's about 11 years later now. So I went from Sprint to opening stores with another company to working with Apple as like a trainer, and then Google
in a store.
No, actually driving around Iowa, going into stores, training people on products.
Gotcha.
And then Google, I did that for a while as well. And then I ended as a national account manager with them. So
Gotcha. What
yeah.
were you over?
So I worked with the Google Pixel program.
Yep.
So I basically helped sell the Google Pixel products, the Pixel phone, Pixel Buds, all of that stuff. So, but yeah, we had a team of about 100 and something odd people around North America going into different stores, and I basically got to help like figure out what they would do in those stores, what they would train on. The stuff that they would give out, different events and stuff that we would do. So yeah, that's
Very
that's what
nice.
I did. So I loved it. It was a hard job to leave for sure. But
Yep.
but yeah, during that time is how we, when we built up our real estate
Yeah.
stuff. So
So if did you start to buy real estate while you were still working for Google?
yeah, so I actually started buying real estate back at my first job with Sprint.
Wow.
Yep. So that was back, I think, we bought our first property about 8 years ago. Just kind of want me to jump in and
Yeah.
explain?
So,
Or
and
what
also
you-
want a little backstory.
Yeah.
Part of this podcast is to share numbers.
Sure.
And like a lot of people are there in the making 30, 40, 50, 60, 70
Yep.
grand a
Yep.
year range
Yeah.
and thinking they don't have money to buy a house. First of all, do people in those shoes have money to buy a house?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. I think that anybody who says they don't have the money, they have the money, they're just not using the money in a way that could help them buy that property. So, yes, the market is a little harder to buy in, for sure. But I think there's a lot of people that are that have learned to live paycheck to paycheck, and they could afford, if they reduce their spending, and maybe that means going and getting that part-time job, just something to increase that income, but you really got to want it for sure. So, but yeah, I think people have the money or can get the money. They just don't want to put in the work and cut down on expenses.
And part of sharing like real numbers. So when you bought your first house, first of all, was it your primary house?
It was.
All right.
It was.
So when you bought your first primary house, can you tell us how much you were making at the time and how you got the money to do this?
Yeah. So I was making next to nothing. I was at the time, my wife and I had been married for about a year, maybe. We were renting an apartment. It was a 1 bed, 1 bath, and then a 2 bed, 1 bath. But we were paying like $740, $750 a month in rent. 7-8 years ago, and we knew that we wanted to own a house because we wanted to build equity. I felt like as a renter, I was just throwing money away. Did not want to do that. I wanted to have a house, be building equity, actually be putting my money somewhere. So we bought our first house. Oh, I don't even know the year that was in. 8 years ago, whatever year that would be, I guess. We bought our
15.
first home. Yeah, it was like 15. Yeah, it would have been 15 because I got married in 14. Bought our first home. At the time I was making about 35 to 40 grand a year.
Wow.
That is what I was making. So my wife was working as a vet tech, and she was bringing in about 20 to 22. So vet techs are very vastly underpaid. Yeah. But yeah, so not much for income, but we were able to save up enough to get involved in like a first-time home buyers program. So there's a lot of banks that do that, and people just don't understand. It's like, if you want to buy a property and you're renting, there are so many first-time home buyer programs out there. We got it was a $1,000 grant. It was the Iowa Wild hockey team program that was running through a bank in Des Moines, and they gave us $1,000. We got to go to like one of their games. Their mascot was there at signing. It was kind of weird, but that was their grant program that they had. So we got $1,000 knocked off. You only had to put 3.5% down, which that's still the case. As a primary residence. So 3.5% down. The property that we bought was, like granny's old home, fixer upper, but carpet in the kitchen, all that stuff. But it was like 92 grand is what we bought this house for. But it was something that we could afford, right? Where we only needed, 5-6K to buy it. It's like we can save 5-6K. So that first year as we rented, we saved that money, we put that down, and we moved in and, had a low mortgage that was lower than our rent, but we were building equity. So,
So how'd you actually get started in wanting, like everybody wants to buy their first house.
Mm-hmm.
Where was the spark to go from, by the way, actually 8 years ago, you bought that first one, right?
Correct.
And 8 years later, how many properties have you scaled to?
How many deals have I done, or how many do I currently have?
Let's go with how many that you currently have.
Okay, we've got 12 doors right now.
Yeah.
So
so like the reason I wanted to point out that number is like you didn't have like a rich grandfather that gave you 400K to
No,
start.
no. Yeah,
And
it
like,
was not daddy's money.
yeah,
So
yeah.
no, no.
And
As
in 8
yeah.
years, you were able to scale from making 35 grand a year,
Yep.
which obviously your pay did increase,
Yeah.
but able to be diligent with what you had.
Yep.
And 8 years later, you have 12 properties that you're working on diligently.
Yeah.
So like I'm just pointing that out for like a lot of people think that it would take 20 years to buy 5
No,
houses or
no,
something.
not at all. Not at all.
All right, so tell me, like, actually, I'd like now to hear the rundown on
Yeah.
like what spurred you and some of the deals that led from there to here.
Sure. So step number one is, I mean, we're living in this house. Our goal was not to have it as a rental property. Our goal was build equity, right? That's what we wanted to do. But as we lived there, we talked a lot about like, I'm working at the time what felt like a dead end job. It did move on to be something more for me, but ultimately it was still, even my last job, it was a W-2 job, working 9 to 5, working for somebody else, building the wealth of somebody else. And that was our thought process. It's like, what can we do to supplement our income? Right. That's what everybody wants to know. It's like, you don't want to be reliant on just the income of your employer because, whether or not you feel like you have a secure job, you don't, your employer could drop you, right then and there.
Yeah.
I was laid off of 2 of those jobs actually that I talked about, just because of structure changes, of program closures. Like Apple closed down their program. Sprint actually like readjusted their leadership structure and just didn't need me anymore. So I mean, it was stuff like that. Like it's like, I need to do something to help supplement income. Like, what can we do to bring in some extra? So we did know some people in our lives that had invested in real estate, and we saw, how this really helped like set them away from their job, and helped, build wealth on the side. So our thought was, how can we do this? It's like, I know I can't save up 20% down for a house. Like it was impossible for me. Like I maybe, maybe if I had started saving then versus now, 8 years, maybe I'd have enough. But at the time, it's like we're not hardly making enough to cover our own bills. We had our first daughter at that point, and my wife went stay at home. So now she's staying at home. We're on one income. I'm maybe making like 45 at this point. And it's like, what the heck are we gonna do, right? So we realize, like, I'm listening, and this is what's so important about listening to podcasts and getting on social media and listening to people, training yourself, right? Is that this guy was talking about how you can buy an investment property as a primary residence. Like, well, how the heck do you do that? Because I was, talking with a lender. He's like, well, you can't, use a conventional loan to buy an investment property, at 3.5% down and not move into it, right? Because it's your primary residence. You're required to move in, to have it as your primary. But this guy's talking about, he didn't buy this property and then just rent it out and stay where he was. He bought it and moved into it and then rented out the previous property. So I'm like, why can't we do that? It's like, I know I can save up 3.5% down. So that's what we did. I mean, we lived there in our first home for 1 year. Then we put 3.5% down on another house. We paid $130 for that. We moved into this house, and then I rented out that first house. My mortgage payment on that first house was $620 a month. I rented it out for $1,200. Okay. Wow. And this is at that time. It's like, rent changes all the time as well. I'm sure that rent would be, quite a bit more now. That house would be worth quite a bit more now. I don't own that house anymore. I actually did sell that one, which I'll get to, but we did that. So we moved, lived there for a year. We're adding sweat equity to these houses as we live there. Like the first house had carpet in the kitchen. It was ugly. But we did it ourselves, and we learned how to, put down LVP, how to do tile backsplash, how to, paint, how to put down carpet, all that stuff. And we did it in the second house. After a year, again, we moved, rented that one out, did it in the third house. After a year, did it again, moved into the fourth house, which is where we're living now. We did end up selling the first house as well. I did it for sale by owner. I bought that house for 91, 92, and I sold it for sale by owner for 145.
Nice.
Which then helped, roll us into other stuff. I had long-term capital gains on that, not short-term because I held it long enough. But yeah, so I'm building this rental portfolio by only putting 3.5% down, living there for a year, building sweat equity as I lived there. And here I am, not making a ton of money, but still being able to, it's like, I know I can save this 3.5% and then buying these properties and doing that. And these were all 30-year fixed rate conventional loans. These first handful of houses, I have the second and third one still, and the fourth that we live in. But my interest rates are 2.5 to 2.6%.
You're not allowed to share
fixed
those
rate.
on the
So
show.
yeah, all right. So yeah, you can hate me all you want for those, but
Yeah.
no, it's so yeah. That was kind of our starting ground. That's how we really got into it.
So how hard was it for you and your family to sacrifice to move those 4 times in 5 years?
Yeah. So
And getting like the wife on
Uh-huh.
board, and like the world tells you buy the home that you want, like you deserve it now, and like even that's something that we're starting the house hacking process.
Yep. Yep.
About to buy our second one in August. And everybody wants it nice now. Like, how were you able to sacrifice for 5 years?
Yeah, I think it's hard for people because people are comfortable, right? People want to, you don't want to buy that old beater house that's a fixer upper and move your family into it and work on it while you're there. You don't want to do that, right? Most people won't do that because they won't want to sacrifice and do that. It was not easy. It was hard, but we did it together. We shared the same goal, the same dream of at that point it's like we can turn this into something that eventually sets me in a way that we can be financially free, where I can get away from the reliance on an employer. Like at that time we weren't necessarily thinking that I could leave my job. We thought maybe 20 years down the road when I'm 40 it'll happen. I'm 29, by the way.
Yeah.
And that was the long-term dream. But we had that dream together, right? And it was something that we wanted to build. After you taste the cash flow on the first property, we were making 600, and the second one was another 600 in cash flow. The third one was another 600 in cash flow. It's like, man, it's like I'm making $1,800 a month in cash flow here. What happens if I get 10 more of these, right? What can I do? Back then it's like, well, I only need $3,000 a month, whatever, to
Yep.
to quit my job, right? But it definitely, it turned into more, especially as you had kids, because they're so dang expensive too. But
So,
but yeah.
question for you: did you put 1.5% down on every house you bought? I mean, 3.5%.
Yeah. So the ones that you lived in, yep. So if you're buying with a conventional loan as a primary residence, you can put 3.5% down. That's what we did. So they're all 30-year, 3.5% down. And that was house 1 through 4. After that point, with house number 4, where we actually moved into a house that we decided we wanted to stay in, living out in the country, kind of having that little dream. We decided when we moved there that instead of buying another property at 3.5% down and moving again, like, let's establish ourselves here, but figure out a way to be creative with our financing, so that way we don't have to save up 20% to put down on properties. And most people would think like, well, how the heck are you going to do that? Right.
This is where it gets good.
Yeah. There are other means of financing. And if you've heard the term, creative financing, it's a real deal. And that doesn't mean that you're using a hard money lender or something else crazy like that. Number one, what most people think of is a cash out refi, which I definitely could have done. If I look back and I think to myself, maybe I should have done that on those first couple, because interest rates are low. I would not do that now, because it would take that 2.5% and bring it up to like 6.5 or 7. So that'd be dumb.
Quick explanation for somebody who might not know what a cash out refi is.
Yeah.
Is you have a house that, let's say it's worth 200, you pour in 50 grand to it, and either it appreciates over time, or your 50 grand makes it go up. Now it's worth 300, 350. You can cash out that loan. So you get a brand new loan in the full. A lot of places will do, what LTV did you get %? Or well, you didn't do it.
Yeah,
So,
no, we didn't do it. No.
And they'll pay you 80 to 90% of your new LTV, and you pay off your old loan, and you get to keep the difference. And a lot of people use that cash to now go reinvest and pull it other places.
Yeah. Yeah. So if you, bought a house for 50,000, just make it easy, and it's worth 100,000 now. Most of them that I was looking at was like 70 to 80% loan to value. So that means, it appraises for 100,000, you owe 50,000, they'll basically refinance you at 70% of that. So $70,000. So, you're going to have 70,000 finances that you're paying on, but then that extra $20,000 difference, that, 50 to 70 there, they give you a check for. So, but that was definitely an option, but for me, I'm like, I don't really know how I'm going to use the money. Like I don't want to buy real estate with it, but I wanted to figure out a way that I could make money, like finance somehow. Like, how can I finance the down payments, right? Like, I don't want to pay for them. I don't want to save for them. So how do I finance them? We did save the cash flow on our properties to reinvest with. We didn't use it like just as, like car
Mm-hmm.
payments or something else. But what we ended up doing was um, we realized like the house we live in, which still live in now for the last 4 or 5 years, um, it was also kind of a fixer upper, right? So little ranch style home, but on land. But what we did was we used the cash flow from our rental properties that we had to fix up this property, to add equity, right?
Mm-hmm.
To add equity to the property with a goal of eventually being able to borrow against that equity. So what we did was like we added an extra like a pole barn. We redid the whole kitchen, finished the basement, all of this stuff. So over a couple years, I didn't buy rental properties for a couple years. Because we were there. I wasn't making enough money to really do that at the time, but we could chip away at our house. So over the course of 2 years, we put about 50, 60,000 into our house to make it the house that we really want to live in. And then what would have been 2021, I ended up pulling out a home equity line of credit, so a HELOC on our property, and got $150,000
How cool is that?
of play money. So yeah, it was good. And the benefit of a HELOC, for those that don't know, the biggest difference between that and a cash out refi is, number one, it doesn't affect my mortgage payment. So my payment on our personal property is still at 2.5%. It doesn't touch that. But with a HELOC, you get to borrow basically against the equity that you have in your property. So we owe 180, it appraised for 325, and I could borrow up to 90% of that. So we got 150K. The interest rate fluctuates with that a little bit, but as long as you're still making strong deals, then yeah, that's the way to go. So
Tell me about the repayment process of your HELOC.
we got an interest only HELOC, which means that there's really not a great repayment unless you're paying more than the payment on it, which we are. So like, we're taking cash flow from properties and then paying that down as quickly as we can. But
Yep.
the benefit to them though is they're still, they let you refinance pretty like there's a flexible like refinance that you can do with them. So
Yep.
if you ever want to refinance, you can. They're super easy to set up. They don't even do like any sort of like hard credit checks or anything. Most banks don't. So it's just based off of your property value. So
And
yeah,
what's
nice.
cool about you pouring that sweat equity into your personal house, you created, I don't know, 50 grand of extra money.
Mm-hmm.
And you got your pole barn, you got your kitchen.
Exactly.
Like
exactly.
a lot of the cool stuff about this game is like, by value adding, you get the value and you get more money.
Yeah. So as we did it, it's like, oh, I hate, we're buying these hickory cabinets, we're buying these wood floors, we're buying these granite countertops. And it was hard to do because like, oh, I'm buying them for myself. But no, I'm investing this money into real estate to then reinvest into real estate, right? So it's just rolling back into itself. So there was a couple other things that we ended up doing. Like last March, we actually bought a condo down on South Padre Island in Texas.
Wow.
We were going to keep it as a short-term rental, but financing stuff changed like right at the end for us. So we actually ended up having, we did a cash sale with that. So we borrowed some money from some friends and relatives. We were going to do a conventional loan on this thing. The day before we were going to leave to drive down there to close, they're like, the HOA owns a couple timeshares, and we didn't realize that. The underwriter just discovered this, and it's against like Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac policy to allow, financing on a property where HOA has timeshare association as well. So it fell through. We lost financing. Did a cash sale, couldn't find good enough financing down there, so we ended up flipping it and making $100,000 in profit. So
tell me numbers that you to put in to front it.
Yeah.
How long you had it and what you sold it for.
So this was March of last year. This was a point where like we're starting to see the vision and the dream of maybe me leaving my job. We had bought, we got our first Airbnb or vacation rental, short-term rental, the end of 2021. We also had purchased another long-term rental because I still wasn't fully committed to the short-term rental game, the end of 2021. And then I was working fully remote because of COVID at that time. So my in-laws own a condo down on South Padre Island, and we're like, why don't we just go spend a couple months there? So we spent half of December and all of January there. That's how I found out about this deal. So the place that we were staying at, we were renting a condo. Built a relationship with the property manager, and I'm like, if anybody's ever selling, let me know. Would love to purchase a place here. Um, and that's really before like the huge boom came down, like where everybody's migrating away from California, wanting to move to Southern Texas.
Yeah.
So he reaches out to me like the week before we're going to leave, and he's like, hey, one of the owners is selling. It's not on the market yet, but you want to come see it? So we go see this place, and he it definitely needed a facelift. It needed some updating, but he's like, yeah, I'll sell this to you for 210. And I knew that other stuff in the area was selling for like 250, 280. So I'm like, yeah, let's do this thing. Like if worse comes to worse and it doesn't work out for us the way that we want the short-term rental, we'll just sell it. Well, in the next few months, like the market really started growing even more. So we closed on this thing as a cash sale. Then we moved the family back down there. So I'm working full time for Google during this time. We're taking weekends, evenings, anytime that we can when I'm not working to renovate this property. Paint, flooring, countertops, all of this stuff, and furnishing it, and making it into a unit that we could rent. And then we couldn't find good financing, like with good terms. It was super high interest rates. 20-year instead of 30-year. So our payment was going to be like $800 a month more than it initially was going to be. So we're like, this just is not in God's plan. Let's try and sell this, because if we try and put it on Airbnb and stuff, we might cut even, maybe not, but it was just a bad deal. So we're like, but if we're gonna sell it, like let's go high. Let's see what happens. I saw a couple other places go for 300, so it's like let's go. What was it, 310 or something that we put it on for, and we or 320, 320. Yeah, we put it on for 320, sale by owner. Within 24 hours, we had 2 cash offers for $5,000 over asking price. So we put about 12 into this for renovations and furnishings, and walked away making $115,000 in the course of 5 weeks. So yeah,
and one cool thing about that is that was purely God's favor and luck. But like when you do this, and I don't want to say luck, but like
yeah,
like that was good right timing for a lot of things.
Yeah.
Is that like when you're in this long enough, good things will happen. Like now you can't go replicate that 5 times right now.
No, for sure. Yeah, and I don't know. I'd like to just comment on luck and stuff too. Like I don't necessarily believe in luck, but I do. I hear that a lot. It's like, well, with that deal, like that's not going to come across very often. You're not going to see that stuff, and it's like, no, not necessarily. You won't make $100,000 or 115 on every flip you do, but you're also never going to find those deals if you don't learn like how to look for them too, right?
Yeah.
So I knew I needed to establish myself with the property manager there. I knew that when it came across as 210, a lot of people probably still wouldn't buy it because like it's a 2-bed, 2-bath, little 1,200 square foot deal condo, right? That a lot of people probably still wouldn't even buy. But I knew that there was something there, and ultimately like we made the leap and went for it. Like it's some crazy idea that we had out of my comfort zone, but I knew it's like you're not gonna see success unless you take some risk as well. So that was all. It was all part of
and
that.
how many people would look at that deal and would have said, I can't afford that, or like walk away. So that's like even like harping on that a little, like just continually following through with things and putting yourself in good situations. Like sometimes things fall through in a good way because you were there. And if you weren't there, like I've heard you like the thing about like people that are successful are getting lucky all the time. They keep putting themselves in good situations to succeed. And a lot of times things actually here, I've got a question for you. I was about to say, a lot of times hard things can also happen, but you're going to get hit with the good ones. What's the hardest thing that you've ran into in this journey? Like a deal that hurt you, like have you screwed up? And if so, how many times?
Oh man. I never really feel like there's ever a bad deal to make. I mean, yes and no. Like, yes, you could lose money and stuff, but I feel like even if you do lose money or not make the money that you want to make on the deal, you're still not losing in the long run because you're gaining knowledge and experience as well with it too, right? So I fully believe in the term, failing your way to success. It's so accurate. I feel like we've definitely been blessed where we haven't had, like super bad deals that we've lost tons of money on or anything. I've never really lost money on stuff. There's deals that I definitely don't make as much money on. But most of the stuff that we bought, like I was telling you, I think earlier, this fourplex and duplex that we
Mm-hmm.
own. I uh I definitely, they're not cash cows. They're not making tons of money for us, but I've been able to build over the last year 100 grand in equity on them. So even though cash flow is not there, in the long run, it's still going to help me. So, and I had a lot of doubt when I bought that, but we're going to roll it into something else here, and it should produce a couple
Mm-hmm.
more properties for me that'll cash flow more. So it's all stepping stones. I think the biggest thing that people need to realize is, I was telling you this earlier, right? So two things hold people back: saying that they don't have enough money, saying that they don't have enough time. I think both of those are honestly excuses for people. You have the time, you have the money, you just don't want to use the time and the money. There's a quote, I forget who says it, but um, don't use your weekends and evenings, or use your weekends and evenings to build a life you want, not escape the life you have.
Wow.
Most people just want to live like anybody else over the weekends and evenings, and I was working full time during all of this. Like, so how did we renovate properties? How did we get to this point? It was, in the house that we're in right now. Like, I putting this floor down, painting these walls, doing all of this stuff, between my job. I'm over here, getting off work at 5 o'clock. I'm coming over here and I'm working here until 11 or midnight. I'm getting up the next morning, doing it over again. I'm spending the weekends here, dude.
Mm-hmm.
Like, we set up air mattresses in like the rooms here. Like, I got a pack and play upstairs that
That you slept in.
yeah, that I slept in, that my kids would sleep in. Put the little one in a room and work on stuff. It's like, yeah, there's sacrifices involved for sure, but in the long run, like, what's your end goal with it, right? And I think that's what people need to focus on. If you really like want this bad enough, you'll figure out a way to make it work.
What is your end goal with all this? Because you've
Yeah,
already marked
yeah,
off step one,
yeah,
like get away from your full-time job and you're living off on semi-passive income.
yep.
So what's your end goal?
So, well, that's a good question. Actually, it's something I need to think through more. Our end goal as of 6 months ago was get out of my full time job. What can I do? What can I do to really make the leap? Like, our thought, even a year and a half ago, was maybe in the next 10 years I can leave my job. Was our thought.
Wow.
We got this HELOC. We made some big moves. We got into the short term rental game, which that really changed things. Because when you're looking at long term rentals averaging $500, $600, $700 a month in cash flow versus a short term rental, like this one averages $2,000 a month in cash flow, that really helped speed things up for sure. But our goal year and a half, 2 years ago, was how can I surpass my salary with cash flow, right? That's what we wanted to
Yep.
do. And then we accomplished that at the beginning of last year. So then we kind of wanted a cushion. So, like, let's get one more and do that. And you asked me, like, being transparent with money. It's like I worked with it was a third party company, like an outsourcing company with Google. So I worked for Google, not directly for them. So I didn't quite have the Google salary, but like my highest salary was like 68 that I was
Mhm.
making at the end.
Mhm.
So it wasn't anything crazy. We cash flow now. If I like had my hands, most of the way off things, right about $100,000 a year. So,
Which is super cool. Like that point cannot be talked about. Like, I know so many people that are making between 50 and 75
yep,
that
yep,
and honestly even maybe more than what you were making.
yeah,
That think that they can't do it and don't have enough money. And also, like, I've been in those shoes making money
yeah,
and thinking I had no money.
yep, yep,
So like I
yeah.
know exactly what that's like.
Well, because you're used to it, right? Like,
Yep.
having the car payment. You're like, oh, I have to have this. It's like, I don't have car payment.
Yep.
Like the car out there, I paid cash for.
Yep.
Which, looking back on that, I actually regret that. I wish I would have financed it, even though it was only 10 grand. It's like I should have. That way I could use that money for a
Yep.
down payment on a house, and then had that pay for it. But in a sense, it does, right? So, but people are just used to like normalizing, having these expensive weddings, paying all this money for college and doing these other things when it doesn't need to be that way.
So what's your biggest piece of advice? There's two parts to this, but first, to somebody who owns a primary home making between 50 and 75, and is wanting to make the leap, but the thought of putting 20% down another house. I think I
Yeah.
might know what your
Yeah.
advice is, but like, what is your advice there?
Yeah. So, I actually had somebody ask me this question through the TikTok as well, just today. Like, what do I do? It's not realistic for me to move. I've got a family, we're established. You're like, I understand that. Some people don't want to do that. I'm not saying that you have to do what we did for sure. I would say, you know, sorry, we got
That
those,
hey, that laundry is testament
that, yeah,
to
laundry
what
going.
you're doing. He put the laundry in between guests. Like
I
you're in
did.
the
I did.
trenches.
I know. I know. Every once in a while, you may have your cleaners and stuff, but every once in a while, you still have to get your hands dirty and go, help work on a property. So we're
Yep.
between cleaners right now, finding somebody new and training them up. So, I'm over here working in the trenches today, cleaning a toilet.
Yep.
So, um, yeah. So I would say, like, especially, everybody knows the new assessments just came out, right? Property values keep going up and up and up, right? They keep finding ways to tax us more, right? So your property is worth more. If you've lived there for a year, your property is worth more than what you paid for it. For sure. Like there's unless you made a super, super terrible deal, your property is worth more than what you paid for it. So look at a HELOC, or if your interest rate could be lower now than it was, look at a, cash out refi. You might say that you don't have the money for 20% down, but you could be sitting on the money. If you do a HELOC, borrow the equity in your property, use that for your down payment, buy your first investment property that way. That's what I would say.
Are you able to on a conventional loan borrow the 20% down?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
can.
It doesn't matter where the money comes from.
Yeah.
Yep.
So like a lot of people get out there and like go to your local real estate meetups. There's so many people that have cash that want to invest, and I'm still
Mm-hmm.
looking for these. So like it's not like I'm the all wise knowing
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
But like getting 20% down through HELOC, cash out refi, through an uncle if you happen to have an uncle.
Yeah.
All those things are possible. To me, it still feels very unrealistic for that person, for somebody in those shoes to save by putting $300 a month away to save
Yeah.
20%
Yeah.
down for an
Yeah.
investment property. If you're looking at it that way, I understand
Yeah.
why you
Yeah.
feel a little bit bleak.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And even if that's not a reality for you, it's like, well, figure out a way to reduce your spending. Live beneath your means, whether that means you sell that Suburban and you go get that cheap Honda Accord for $3,000 or whatever, that you get rid of some of those higher expenses, stop eating out so much. I'm not a Dave Ramsey advocate because he doesn't believe in financial freedom. Financial peace is great, but still, like, he gives good advice on saving. Like, how do you figure out a way to save? Reduce your spending is the best way to save. Secondly, is increase your income. Like, how can you increase your income? Okay, you're working 40 hours a week. What can you do on the side to make more money? Like, so I mentioned, we make about $100,000 a year from our cash flow. Now I don't have a job. So now I have all of this extra time. Like, we spend, I would say on average 2 hours a week managing our properties.
That is
on
unbelievable.
a normal week, 2 hours. So now I have my time back. And this is what I would consider financial freedom. It's not making millions a year. It's having my time to do with what I want to. But part of what I want to do is figure out other ways to make some money on the side, because I don't want to sit around and do nothing. Like most people perceive landlords, just to sit around collecting rent checks. That's not the case. I am active in our business. I'm more active than what I need to be, but I like to be. But like, I'm also, doing social media content creation, right? So, I'm making about $1,000 a month doing social media stuff, selling different products that we create for our properties as well. Finding other ways. It's like, if I can figure out a way to use a couple hours a week and make, $1,000 a month, just, I'm not a social media guy. I never was. Like, I grew up as a conservative homeschool Christian kid. So, but I got out of my comfort zone and I tried something because, like, I know I can monetize social media. So I figured out a way to do it. Like, figure stuff out. Like, you can make money doing other things, like increase your income in other ways. To save for it that way too. So
Tell me about what's happened with your TikTok actually.
Yeah, that was a weird one. So I actually started up my TikTok on a bet with my brother-in-law, who said you can't monetize social media. You actually can monetize social media. So I started taking it seriously. I opened up an account, didn't really do much with it, but started taking it seriously about 6 months ago. When I left my job, because I wanted to be able to help other people do what we had been able to do. It's like for me, it wasn't just about keeping it to ourselves, because it was people, like I told you, Michael Elefante, Ryan Pineda,
Yep.
Rob Built, some of these guys that like encouraged me to do this. So it's like I want to be like those guys. I want to be somebody that's gonna keep going off until I go get it, but that's okay. I want to be a guy that can help encourage other people. That are normal people can actually get here. So that's what I got on for, and I just started sharing our story, and it blew up, and now I'm at about 100,000 followers across platforms, and
Yeah.
and actually being able to share my story and help people, and train other people on how to do it. So
Awesome.
yeah.
I'm going to leave you with one deep thought here, or deep question. That's going to put you in the spot.
All right.
I was sitting at the cigar lounge the other day, as every quality guy should be doing.
Oh really? That lifetime? That
No, no, no. Actually, this would have been over in West Des Moines at David's Cigar
hmm,
Lounge.
I need to go
Yeah,
sometime.
yeah,
I've never been,
yeah.
so it sounds wonderful.
And I'll take you as a
Okay.
celebration for being
All
on the
right.
show.
All right.
I heard a guy who was practicing very unsound financial tactics with his life,
Okay.
and he said he was making almost nothing and smoking $100 a day in cigars.
Oh no. Okay.
So great.
Yeah, it
And
sounds like
and he
a good
said,
idea.
you life short and you don't see a U-Haul behind a casket. Why do you need to make money anyways? So with you, and even like with your faith, like with you knowing the end prize is still not dying with 100 homes.
Hmm.
The end goal is not like, it almost scares you a little bit, like doing all this just for nothing.
Yeah.
So like,
Yeah.
what would you say to that? Like, you can't take any of this with you.
Yeah.
You're striving for so much. Why, and what's the end goal with that?
Yeah, no, that's a really deep question.
Yeah.
That's good though. I would say, my best answer, like, I don't know, I'll go back to this a lot, because I feel like, the perception on life, like, this is going to steer away from financial, and this is going to go into the meaning of life in general. But
Yeah.
I feel like this is important because a lot of people like don't want to look at it this way, right? We are all here for a short period of time, and we're going to die. And no matter what you do in between, you're not bringing any of that with you. Correct. So that guy, there's no U-Haul behind a casket. That's true. But you can still leave a legacy behind you. You can still make an impact, even though you can't bring, uh, like houses and money with you. You can still leave an impact behind, on the world behind you, and that's really what I want to do. So and I'll talk about my faith too. As a Christian, I believe that like my calling is to share the gospel, is to serve Christ with my life. I believe that I'm going to heaven someday, and for me that's super important, to share that with people. So I try to do the best I can, with this avenue on social media as well, to not just talk about building wealth, but talk about building, a legacy, through Christ, wherever you go. So like for me, my goal wasn't making tons of money, working all these hours. I see some of these big guys that are like super wealthy in this game, just throwing away their lives and their time, like not using their time for anything but more work and more work and more work. When I got to this point of leaving my job, like in getting up to here, by the way, like our family was involved with all of this. We decided we're not going to do this unless our kids can join. So we don't do. It's very rare that we'll work on something without our kids being there. Yeah,
Wow.
it's annoying, and yeah, I've had kids come through and scribble on walls or get into paint or ruin something or whatever, but it's all part of the process. For me, it was I want to be there for my kids. I want to be able to have a bigger impact on their lives as a dad, because my thought process is like my job as a dad is not just providing financially, it's providing spiritually, emotionally, and physically as well. So that's just a quarter of this whole experience. So what can I do to make sure that I'm there for the rest of it? So, and then with houses, I feel like it's it's not something like my goal is not to be making millions a year. Like if that happens, like so be it. Like I would love to be able to, you know, have higher income that I can use to bless people with. My goal is not to live in some fancy mansion or drive Lamborghinis. Like that's not what I want to do.
Yep.
You know, I see these guys flaunting their, you know, fancy cars and fancy houses and stuff, but it's like it's just temporary. You know,
Yep.
it's how can I use this to help other people with too. So, and then my houses I hope to leave behind is a um, generational wealth thing for my kids. You know, here's my children. You know, you get, you know, all of these properties that are paid off. You know, like they'll be paid off by the time I'm 50,
Hmm.
55. Like, and then they can have these when I die. So,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, that's a super old
No, you're
dryer,
good.
by the
You're
way.
good.
It's gonna keep going, but you know, and then that way maybe they can do the same thing for their kids.
Yeah.
So
And
that was the goal.
even just the cash flow from those properties, what they can do to reinvest for in the next 50 years.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate it for coming on here. First of all, tell people the name of your social medias and where they can find you.
Yep. So I've got it on my shirt here too. That was unintentional. You actually asked me to
Liar.
join this today, so
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
it was. It's a comfy hoodie. But rental cash flow. TikTok is kind of my main source. I'm on Instagram a little bit, but TikTok is where you can find me. But yeah, we're in Des Moines, Iowa, rocking out the STR space now, which we are sitting in the cow tipper, thus the cow up there. You can also find the corn crib too, but
Yep.
yeah, loving life, loving what we're doing.
Yep.
So yeah,
And you also run, what's the website for direct booking?
yeah, DSM, so Des Moines stays.com.
Yep. Gotcha.
Yeah, yeah.
All right.
Thanks.
Well, I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks, AJ.
Yeah.
Great,
Yeah.
great being here, man.
Yeah.